I was fortunate to meet one of his friends recommended that he and his wife Lee, who's in the back, join. And as I started speaking with him, I realized that Jack just has some great stories to share. He's been building companies, helping companies be built, investing, and so forth. And it would be a crime to not have you on stage here at Keanaissance. So would you please welcome Jack Russo?
Thank you so much. I have to say, Greek has improved over the last 15 years. There's no question about it. And I am really, really upset that I didn't take the advice of those students who said, find us $1 million and we will turn it into $10 million. We will buy all these properties that are way below value. But I said, you just told me we're going to have to spend like 200,000 on the grease money out of the 1 million. They said, don't worry, we will get it back. And they were exactly right. And I regret not doing it. So maybe this is another inflection point. Yeah, it's interesting. The Israelis are smarter than the Italians, that's for sure. I won't say anything about the Greeks. So my topic today is broadening Silicon Valley in a global way. Kia represents a potential. There's a lot more than that. There's lots of other countries as well. There is a little cut sheet about me that I uploaded to the WhatsApp. If you wanted to just hear more, read more, there's more detail on it. I used to charge by the hour. I don't do that anymore. The reason is there's only a limited number of hours, right? If you really think about it, the truth is, in terms of waking hours, our lifetimes are typically less than 1 million waking hours, certainly far less than that. If we're lucky enough to live to 100 years, some people are saying maybe we can live to 110, 120. Of course, lawyers' eyes light up when you say that. So I have been very successful with a law firm that I started. I was lucky enough to come to Silicon Valley at a time when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were kids, broke, no money, no capital, no one behind them, wanting to start a company. And luckily they came to a law firm that I joined called Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, now called Fenwick and West. And they offered the firm stock for services. Like idiots, the firm, us collectively, I was lawyer number 10, but obviously a very young man at the time, said no. We used to watch what the value of that stock would have been over time. It kept breaking the sell size limit of the spreadsheet that we had because, we all would have been billionaires, I'm sure. But as a result of leaving that firm, because it wasn't as entrepreneurial as I wanted to be, I started my own firm that now is named Computer Law Group. We have been lucky enough to start a side venture firm called Florence Ventures. The success of the venture firm led to establishing a nonprofit foundation called the Foundation for Creativity. And we focus on dispute resolution, but we look at the broader ideas of what generates the creative idea that springboards off of someone like Julie saying, what if Kia became an opportunity zone for new investment? She didn't exactly say that, but it was an idea that I thought, hey, if you really wanted to drive something in the island, you could actually do what they've done in certain places in America, which is turn certain geographies that are very run down into opportunity zones with huge tax savings. So Healthy 100 Years is another nonprofit that is trying to look at how can we motivate employers to look at their employees as humans, not robots, and help them extend their health so that they look forward to a longer life. So Florence Ventures focuses on very early stage in the garage kind of startups. Like typically people will come in with an idea, a domain name, and maybe a few slides. We don't even call it a business plan anymore. It's called kind of slideware. A few slides saying this is the general direction. What do you think? And then we hope to sort of help them get to the next stage. So the firm is in Northern California. Some people are like, where is this? This is essentially a 6-county area in Northern California. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. Silicon Valley tends to be very focused around Route 101 going north and south. If you've been there, Route 280 is the other fast road, north and south. Lots of companies, lots of density of companies. Seems like every day there's a new company being formed and funded. And typically, if you were to fly in to San Francisco or to San Jose, those are the two main airports, SFO, if you're looking for the 3-letter code, SJC, if you're looking for San Jose. This is what it looks like. Essentially, buildings typically not that tall, typically maybe 3-4 stories. Still earthquake country. The center of gravity, in my opinion, is Stanford University. Stanford has produced lots of Nobel laureates. My lovely wife, Dr. Lee Suter, is a PhD from Stanford. I was lucky enough to meet her on Windy Hill. Some people heard that story. I'll defer it to cocktail hour. The father of Silicon Valley, in my view, was a professor named Frederick Terman. He was a professor of electrical engineering. This is the 1920s. He basically motivated his students not to go to academia, not to return to academia, to start businesses. He was like, hey, this is the time to be thinking about the future, and the future is not academia as much as it is business. And he really, in some ways, motivated Hewlett and Packard to create Hewlett-Packard. And Hewlett-Packard was like, and is like, the great-granddaddy of all of these startup companies, lots of startups. I mean, the idea for a personal computer did not come from Steve Jobs' head or his partner's head, Wozniak. It came from HP. It came from the future of computing will be smaller, faster, and cheaper. You could almost repeat those 3 descriptions over and over again, and that's what you see happening over and over again in computing. So he did very well. I mean, not very well financially, by the way. He did very well in terms of his notoriety, but never made the kind of money that someone like Elon Musk has made and accumulated. So this is a little bit about me. I'll go fast. My first decade of law practice, that was my graduation from law school picture. You notice all the hair? The bank card then was a piece of plastic. They were moving away from the passbook card. People heard I used to keep my money in a coffee can in my dad's freezer. That's another story for another time. But essentially, that was a savings bank in Los Angeles. I went to UCLA in Los Angeles to law school. And so it roughly corresponds with what I would call the end of the first wave of computing, which is mainframe computing. And I was a mainframe computer because before going to law school, I got a master's degree in computer science from City University of New York for free, no tuition in New York at the time. And so I knew these rooms. These were called the glass temples. Everything was air conditioned, the floors were elevated, everything was designed with the idea that you worshiped these big machines, but they were expensive. And to get access, you had to have credentials, like a password, and an account that gave you credit for what computing time you were using. And Silicon Valley 1.0 is sort of a version of this. Even though IBM is fundamentally an East Coast company and really is the thought leader in mainframes, Silicon Valley started to realize, really HP, hey, we can do better than these mainframes. We can turn them into the next stage, which is building sort of an electronic commerce system based on a cluster of computers. This is the beginning of the idea of the internet. Back in those days, it was called EDI. It was electronic data interfacing. And my second day of law practice, now I'm a dad, so the 10 years have gone fast, a lot less hair, young kids, my daughters, Danielle and Anne-Marie, is very much correspondent with what I call the second wave, which is the computers are getting smaller they're getting cheaper, they're getting faster, and they're clustering together. So we're building more and more computational intelligence over time at a lower cost. And of course, the firm that I was with was doing very well. It started Apple Computer, we started Oracle, we started Electronic Arts. Like idiots, we didn't take stock in any of those companies, even though they would offer them that. And Silicon Valley was beginning to sort of recognize workstations. The idea for the Macintosh came from Xerox. This is a picture of Xerox Star's workstation that never really made it to the market. There's a book about this, about how Xerox fumbled the future. My third decade of law practice, my kids are now young ladies. They're gorgeous now. They're mothers, of course, and families. I can talk about them forever, but I won't. Networking is now really settled. Like just the fact that we can, on Kia, an island, I can get this presentation at short notice and download it from Silicon Valley. It can make its way here and actually work with this equipment instantly. The tech person, we should give him a hand. He's amazing. He got this all to work. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Probably couldn't have happened in Silicon Valley as fast. So networking is sort of, hey, it's understood, but this is the beginning of smaller computers. This is the beginning of computers that you can put in a briefcase. My fourth decade of Silicon Valley is now, it's a long story. First wife fell in love with my next door neighbor. I won't tell you that. That's a long story. It could be very painful. You could have a, yes, there's a Netflix coming. And so this fourth wave is the internet, of course, that ties it all together, right? Because it ties all this computing power together in a way that creates the beginning of the future that I'm going to spend more time on, as much as you allow, but I won't go over the limit. And there's this Silicon Valley 4.0 that really started with this idea of running banner ads. I don't know if people even see these anymore. They really almost don't exist anymore. And there's various things where there's sponsored ads. These are now very subtle. They weren't as subtle when they started. It used to be off to the side, and they would tell you it's sponsored. It sort of does that. The fifth wave was tying this all in with smaller little smartphone computers that are almost as powerful as those mainframes. I carry two of them. I have two different numbers. Even sometimes that's enough, but that's not enough. But I could tell you that there is this Silicon Valley 5.0, which is social commerce, where we tie together all of this social media with transactions, with the ability to get stuff delivered, sometimes the same day. In America, sometimes the same day. You ask Amazon to deliver, they can deliver like within 4 hours. People don't even need to go out in their car to go to a shopping center anymore. It's collapsed a lot of retail in Northern California and throughout the United States. And Amazon just keeps gobbling up these retail centers and turning them into distribution points. It's changed the nature of real estate, commercial real estate at least. So this sixth wave is really where we should be thinking about where the future goes, because data is now king. I know there was a slide that said cash is king. I think a lot of people would say data is king, because data is driving artificial intelligence. Data is driving the way in which the future of computing will be defined. So this AI impacts all of us in a variety of ways, because oftentimes we don't even try to remember. We just go to Google. How many times have you asked someone like your wife or your husband, well, what do you think the answer is? And she's just like, just go to Google. Stop bugging me, just go to Google. Because it's like the AI systems are always working. Remember there was a day when everyone was looking up in the sky because there was a change happening. The sun was being covered for a few minutes. I forget the exact day. It's like the world stopped, but the computing power continued to run. It just continues to run forever. So it's leading to this idea that we are becoming an intelligence augmented machine ourselves. So think of AI as the computer robotics Think of the human as the intelligence augmented by the computer robotics. A robotic computer could not have come up with the idea that Julie came up with. Probably could have assembled some data, but couldn't necessarily have had the vision, couldn't necessarily have had the creativity to say, this is the next goal. This is what should be the goal for this island, or for any island, or for any place. So there's a certain computational intelligence that creates a collective intelligence. It's really about us as humans, what we do with that collective intelligence. I mean, some people may rely on the computer for a lot more than other people. Other people can bring to their own intelligence what the computer can give them base knowledge on. This is impacting all knowledge work. All of us are knowledge workers. I bet there's not a single person, well, there might be a few people here, that do manual work. All of us do knowledge work. And the knowledge work is going to be amplified by the computer. And it is amplified by the computer. Of course, manufacturers saw this years ago. Manufacturing productivity went way up. The number of people employed went way down. A Tesla factory has like 90% less people in it and probably 100 times more robotics than most of the standard automobile factories, although the others are catching up. Obviously, they follow. The investments in Silicon Valley are amplifying this movement towards artificial intelligence or intelligence augmentation. Corporations are embracing it, one after the other initiatives continue. And it's still at the early stage. It's still very, very early in this game. And so part of what you could say or ask, is this going to move evolution in the right direction? Now, this war in Ukraine didn't exactly help thinking that evolution was headed in the right direction. Like probably every form of data processing entity out there would say, this is a bad idea. This is going to lead to all sorts of miserable things. But some human beings must have, maybe a single one, maybe more, thought it was a good idea. Just as you could say China's focus on Taiwan could be viewed as a very bad idea versus maybe it's some people think that's their future. But there's a global scale social evolution that's also in process that's occurring. And that's what's going to be very important to balance against all of these initiatives, which is what is the impact on the environment? What is the impact on health? What is the impact on future generations? What is the impact on other resources? So I say on anything, ask these questions about, will the global community evolve in a way that makes sense in terms of worldwide health, collective intelligence, global ethics? You go down a list of these things. And so I stop here because I don't have all the answers. I look forward to questions. I can tell you, because some of you asked me last night, so what is the metaverse? Where is that going? You know something about computers. What is that? So imagine that all of you are wearing these computer amplified glasses to be called the eye glasses with an eye. Apple will release these next year. They probably will have a slightly different form factor, but imagine instead of the dark glasses that some of you have on, although they'll probably have a version that has dark glasses, you have all of this. You're going to be able to whisper into these glasses, so who is this Jack Russo guy? And the glasses will bring up images from throughout the Google network, throughout whatever search platform you use, Bing, Google, whatever it might be, and you'll have other imagery, including what I look like in the metaverse. I'm not sure I'm going to use Thomas for the talent agency. He seems like he's too biased towards women. That was my remark. I'm not ready to become a female yet. I've thought about it. My wife said she would leave me if I did that. Okay, she's right. But think about it as you have another level of what is this blueprint of a person in this world that's called the metaverse, that is essentially supporting a gamified version of our current reality. So Thomas is ready to turn mostly women. I'm not sure he takes men, although he may come in and say, no, you're wrong, I take men. But I'm not ready to wear your shirt, Thomas. So I will take questions. I can tell you the metaverse is real, but will only emerge if enough people start to buy into the view of, I want to be an avatar in the metaverse. I want people to converse with my metaverse robot. I want to screen out potential clients in that fashion, for example, or potential friends or potential colleagues. It's not the way I would do it, but it could be a way people do it. And this is being driven mostly by Facebook, to some degree by Microsoft, to other degrees by Google and Apple. And these glasses will be driven about a view that you not only want to be living right now in the moment here, but you want to be interacting with all your friends in the metaverse back in Germany and Zurich, because the density of your interaction, because of the limit amount of time there is, makes you do 2, 3, 4, 5 things at once. That's a definition of the metaverse. Thank you.
Excellent, Jack. Thank you. I'm sure we got a couple of questions. Yeah, Kimberly, let's get this.
Great.
So I'd love to know that when you're looking at, as an investor into AI technologies, do you also look at, the potential challenges and how they're actually using AI? Because you said, Thomas is biased towards women, but the AI technology has primarily been developed by men, has a lot of biases and a lot of challenges for a lot of lack of diversity. So do you, as an investor, challenge the technologists around those kind of elements as well?
We do some interesting stuff at Florence Ventures, which most venture capitalists don't do. We sometimes will assemble like a group like this, although typically the range would be, you guys are like the top 1/10 of 1% from a socioeconomic point of view. We would take the whole range and we would say, okay, so this is the product. This is what Apple's going to, Apple does this too, but in a grander way. Would you buy it? Would you buy it if the price point is, like the initial price point Apple's talking about is going to be like $3,000 to $4,000? One of the reasons they increased the price of the iPhone is they want to get people ready for spending $3,000 or $4,000 on what you'd say, oh, it's another pair of sunglasses, but it's a computer. It's a computer that is like an interactive assistant in lieu of maybe hiring a secretary. Is that worth $3,000 or $4,000? Like at some point, you have to ask people what would they buy. So we do that to get feedback on, is this something the world is ready for? I can tell you that I saw the business plan, the very, very first business plan for Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com was doing something most people didn't think would succeed, which is putting data in the cloud, sales data, which is often viewed as very proprietary. People view their customer list and their customer information as very trade secret, and everyone in the firm was like, this is never going to succeed. No one will trust the data in the cloud against security breaches and whatnot. And I'm telling you, we could have made billions on an early investment in Salesforce.com, another big whale that got away. And we didn't, because we just disbelieved that businesses would move that much proprietary data into the cloud. So you make mistakes too, because even if people that you interviewed said, no, I'm not ready to do it, at some point the transition happens and it starts to happen. And so now I think any company that doesn't have Salesforce.com is viewed as a dinosaur. Like, you have to have that to understand what's going on with your sales funnel. Like, everyone should have some version of a CRM system, whether it's Salesforce.com or something else. I hope that answers, but that's one approach we use.
I always use sense of humor, even in my business negotiation. So wouldn't you rather invest in the medical to find the perfect pill that people will have to take in order to, because of the psychological impact that these changes, these amazing technological changes will create in people, the young people, the gap between those who can afford it and cannot afford it, and the over data, and we haven't touched stealing identity and security
Right.
yet.
Yes.
So we should be in the pharmaceutical to really create the right pill.
Well, it's like it's a big business in America, right? Pharmaceuticals are a big business now. This area called nutraceuticals, which don't require FDA regulation, is big business. I could tell you a very brief story. So the original version, very, very early version, 35 years ago, I brought that client that created the original version of these glasses, the very original idea for what was then like, what is virtual reality? It wasn't even a word in the dictionary. It wasn't even a term. Jaron Lanier walked into our office, like literally walked in as a walk-in client. I mean, you know, you're in a skyscraper building and someone goes up the elevator, and this is like 35, almost 40 years ago, goes up the elevator and comes to the secretary at the front desk and says, I need to see a lawyer. Of course, he's got this big this is true, big shaggy hair. If anyone Googled Jaron Lanier, you'd see the big guy. And the secretary was like, she didn't know who to call. And it was like a Friday afternoon at about 4:30. Of course, I'm still there working. Everyone else is gone. So she says to me, Jack, I don't know what to do. It's a walk-in client. I've never had this happen. I said, put him in the conference room, offer him a bottle of water and a cup of coffee, and I'll come in. And I met him. Of course, you know, he smelled badly, similar to the job story. Yes, it's a true story. He was dressed poorly, and he didn't dress up for the meeting. I mean, this ties to the whole Apple story about why we didn't take the stock. It's a goofy story. And he engaged with me. He said the future is going to be people wearing computers as wearables. And I have a prototype. Of course, it was very kludgy. You had to put on this big mask. I couldn't imagine it. And I said to the partners, we got to take this guy as a client. This was the reason I left the firm. This guy, Jaron Lanier, is the reason I left the firm, because they said to me, number one, he didn't dress up for the meeting. Number two, you told us he smelled bad, and it's such a stupid idea. Who's going to wear this stuff? It looks bad. It's not fashionable. Thomas will be against it because it makes women look ugly. Like they did the whole 9 yards. I said, we have to put money into these guys. This guy is onto something. Computers are getting smaller, faster, and cheaper. He's got the wearable version. Of course, you had to wear like a big battery pack back then, you know, like a big strap-on thing. Not a sex toy, strap-on battery. And they said no. And I said, I'm leaving. And they said, over one client, we didn't even decline him. You just have to get him to pay our retainer. I said, he won't pay. He wants a partner, just like Jobs and Wozniak. He wants a partner. He wants someone who believes. He wants a believer, and not just a believer who's charging hourly fees. He wants someone who believes with skin in the game. And they said, no, we're not doing it. So I said, can I do it? And I'll stay at the firm, but I'm going to put my money in. No, that's a conflict of interest. Why? Well, if you make a lot of money, we're all going to be jealous. I swear, that's what they said to me. I said, how much notice do you need? They said 6 months. I said, are you crazy? 6 months? Oh, you're a partner, you're important, da-da-da. And it was like a funny story because, like I said, I can give you 3. And I'm starting the firm with him. I'm starting the new firm with him. I'm starting what became Computer Law Group with him. And they were like, you're making such a big mistake. Look at this guy. Do you even want to be photographed with him? I said, yeah. He is actually the originator of the concept of virtual reality. If you go search Jaron Lanier, high school dropout, somewhat similar to Jobs. Jobs a college dropout. He was a high school dropout. Homeschooled. His mother homeschooled him after he dropped out, and probably before as well. And he's a brilliant technologist. And he's written a couple of books that sort of warn what you were saying. He really warns about this computing stuff can really turn us all into robots, which is a big mistake. And I left because they said, no, we're not going to invest in him. I did invest in him. He didn't become successful. I lost the money. But I learned a lot of lessons about entrepreneurship, including my own personal journey. So in a way, but for Jaron, there would be no healthy 100 years. There would be no foundation for creativity. There would be no computer law group. There would be no Florence Ventures. And he's probably caused a lot of people to change their mind about a lot of things.
Something really important though. People talk about early adopters, and a lot of what we're talking about is the adoption of new things, how fast the things adopt, and so forth. But I agree with you, and I use that term as well myself. But people want are the early believers. So frequently, people are trying to find whether or not you also believe what they believe, and to be a co-partner in belief is certainly what this group is all about, and I think it's so necessary. Lauren, you've got a question for Jack.
Yeah. So a lot of the stories that I've heard you tell are about how people are afraid of new ideas, and they don't want to necessarily invest in something that is unheard of. And I feel like that's so true across the board. But what I've seen in this presentation is that the people who are successful have taken another idea and maybe done it better. So like the example with Apple creating something that was maybe an original idea of HP. These glasses, I mean, this is what, 10 years after Google Glass? Is it about finding the right team and the right people to take an old idea and really make it right? What's more compelling to you as an investor? Something new, original, or exciting, or someone that's finding the right market or the right team for an idea that exists and making it better?
So there's a body of literature. I have an M.B.A. from Columbia, and you study all this case stuff in Columbia. And there's a body of literature called fast followers. And the body of literature on fast followers is people that copy and do so legally, sometimes even do so illegally, do better than the original pioneers. So Google Glasses are now at stage 3. They found the niche market in medical. So in America, if you go into certain doctor's offices, particularly where it's like an HMO or something that's driven by insurance, which a lot of medical is in the States, because we don't have socialized medicine, is they'll be wearing these glasses and they'll say to you, and they waste a lot of time saying it, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can't. Now, like, it's almost like a legal thing. They have to get you to sign off that there's a recording that's going on in real time while the glasses are on, going to a back office probably in India where there's a transcriptionist, which will eventually be replaced by AI and some sort of robotics. And that's like a niche market for Google Glass 3. This eyeglass stuff is going to be much more consumer-oriented towards what you might say is assistant. But in many ways, they copied what they always buy each other's products and reverse engineer them. That's like a standard thing. You can legally do that. It's not a problem. So think of it as the evolution of this eyewear still has a ways to go. But there's a belief that it literally will replace the iPhone. I mean, that's a big product line. Like, it's 80% of revenue for Apple is the iPhone, various iPhone versions. They just essentially closed down the iPod. People saw the announcement. It shocked me. Oh, we don't make enough money. They still made money on these little smaller versions that just play music. They said, no, we just move people to iPhones, because they want to move them up the chain. They don't want them to just buy the low-end devices anymore. But the answer is, I think the statistical answer is, you're better off copying and then figuring out how to make it better, unless you really have some big money or some big partners who can essentially support you through everything you learn as a pioneer. Like, that's just the way it is. You just save a lot of time and money. Well, you learn a lot, right? You learn a lot from other people's failures. Like, a lot has been learned from Google Glass 1, Google Glass 2, even Google Glass 3, and a lot will be learned from probably the initial failure of this product. Apple has had products that fail. A lot of people don't remember this. There was something called the Newton that was a precursor with handwriting. It failed. I mean, there was something called the Lisa, which was the precursor workstation. People don't even remember that. It was essentially a high-end version of the Macintosh. It failed. So there are failures that happen, even within big companies that have big budgets, that you would think that they could turn these failures into successes, but they don't always work that way.
Doc, would you invest in somebody who is 48 years old, who's always worked in a corporate, and decides at age 48, after maybe 25 years of working in other people's systems, to create a startup and wants you to back them? Would that be...
Only if Thomas is putting them in the metaverse. No, just kidding.
All of our talent will wear those glasses.
There you go.
How about that?
No, so the answer is that most people somehow think that older folks don't deserve investment. I personally think that most people sort of get my maternal grandfather said, they finally get the brains. That was his very Italian statement, but he said it in Italian, so it sounded better, which is when you get to be in your 40s and you've fallen down a few times, it's like you finally get the brains of how to make something successful. So we've invested in some people that have come in with teams. All these guys are in their 60s, and the first question I ask them is like, and by the way, they all have their own money, and they're all putting their own money in. And they're like, well, we came to you because we know, number one, you're really going to help us, and number two, you're going to put some money in because we're putting in money. Like, we're going to make you a real partner, right? So these guys, the latest group that we funded was like 5 guys. I think the average age was like 64. There was one guy that was like 74. And they're going to completely change the way encryption works. And they're serious, and we like to say now, as I've gotten older, we see a lot of the same clients we've seen, but at different ages with different kids and grandkids. We focus more now almost on the serial entrepreneur. So I'm sure the point that you made, that person lacks a little bit of what we would look for to answer that specific question, which is, have they fallen a few times before?
Right.
Have they learned something? Because inevitably, and this is the magic of Silicon Valley, it doesn't do with what I think in Germany and Switzerland to some degree. If you fail a few times there, they're like, you're blacklisted. Like, forget it. That guy's unbankable. Get lost, man. He lost a lot of money. We're like, welcome that. We're like, you learned something from that, right? I mean, if they can't say they have, then you probably have to show them to the door. But usually they say, yeah, I learned a lot from that. Like, I really learned a lot. And one of the ones we had recently, the guy came in, he said, I'm taking no venture capital. I said, well, I run this side firm. He said, no, we don't even want your money from your fund. We want your personal money. And ideally, we want money that, like, you understand this is going to be a 10-year hike. So they were very specific about this is going to be a 10-year hike, and I believe them. So I put money in for my pension plan, like literally on the view that I won't retire for another 10 years. Lee looked at me like, hey, come on. Like, really?
Doc, thank you so much
you're
for coming.
welcome.
It was really outstanding to have you.